Hello, my name is Douglas Bloch. Welcome to the Depression Recovery Channel, where each week we talk about practical tools and coping strategies for healing from depression and anxiety. Today is Flashback Friday, a feature in which I republish one of my earlier videos you might not have seen that contains really important coping strategies that will help you attain a better mood. Now here's today's video. The title of today's video is, What is Complex PTSD? But first we have to start out with our regular joke, or pun as it may be. So why did they call it the Dark Ages? Because there were so many nights. The reason I've created this video is to introduce you to a mental health disorder I just recently found out about. It's called complex PTSD, or C-PTSD. And as the title suggests, it is a very complicated disorder, so much so that we can't really do justice to it in this short video, but I wanted to make you aware of its presence. And if after watching the video you think you might have complex PTSD, I strongly suggest you reach out to a mental health professional, someone who's had experience in working with this kind of disorder, so that you can get the best help available. By now, almost all of us have heard of the term PTSD, which stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. This term first came into use to describe what the Vietnam veterans were experiencing when they came home from the war and what happened to them as they entered domestic life. PTSD was called shell shock in World War II and battle fatigue in World War I. Same experience, different terms. So what happens in PTSD is that you're exposed to a traumatic event that stimulates recurring memories or flashbacks of that event later on. In other words, it has profound repercussions for the future. One of the common examples for Vietnam vets was you're driving around and there's a backfire of a car, and suddenly you're taken back to the scene where there were bombs dropping around you. Completely brings you back into that memory, and for a moment you think you're actually back in the war. Obviously shakes you up quite a bit. Other symptoms besides these memories could include difficulty falling asleep, recurring nightmares, irritability, outbursts of anger, and also difficulty concentrating. Something that's so serious that now in the VA hospital or the VA department, there's just all sorts of protocols set up to help soldiers who have PTSD. And of course, this has occurred in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So what's the difference between complex PTSD and PTSD? Well, in complex PTSD, you're not just exposed to one trauma, you're exposed to multiple traumas that occur over months or even years. This often occurs in childhood, where the brain is still forming and there's little chance of escape, right? Because children are tiny and their parents are big, and sometimes children will say, hey, there's abuse going on. They're not believed. So this is going over years, even sometimes decades. As a result, it's called developmental trauma. And there are different circumstances that can produce this kind of ongoing trauma, and I'd like to share some of them with you right now. Repeated sexual, verbal, or physical abuse. Abandonment or neglect during childhood. Growing up in a family with alcoholic or drug-addicted parents. Having a mentally ill parent. Having parents who themselves were abused or neglected. Being a child of divorce or parental separation, and growing up in an unstable environment with repeated moves. Now that I've explained the circumstances that can produce complex PTSD, and a lot of us can identify with probably more than one, now I'd like to describe the symptoms that occur as a result of this repeated trauma. Deep-seated shame. People with shame often feel that they are defective at the core, that there's something inherently wrong with them. Feelings of powerlessness, easily overwhelmed. Becoming hopeless and despairing about life and feeling that life has no meaning. Hypervigilance and inexplicable fear, persistent feeling of danger lurking. Difficulties with emotional regulation, and feeling isolated and disconnected, a deep sense of loneliness. Since the young adult brain doesn't fully develop until age 25, these adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, can permanently impact the brain and have impacts that last long into adulthood. Like PTSD, C-PTSD can also create mental health disorders, such as anxiety, depression, eating disorders, drug addiction, alcoholism, self-harm attempts, suicidal attempts, and suicidal thoughts. It's quite possible that after watching this video, and if you identify with some of the symptoms we've listed, you might suspect that you could suffer from complex PTSD. It might explain some of the problems you've been dealing with for years, not being able to resolve. The question then becomes, what can you do about it? And the answer is very simple. Seek out your nearest mental health professional, psychiatrist, nurse practitioner, psychologist, social worker, etc., and let them know what you're going through and see if they can, help you identify what's going on and, more importantly, help to treat it. Speaking of professionals, I was talking to a very savvy psychiatrist the other day, and she explained to me that complex PTSD explains why some people are dealing with treatment-resistant depression, meaning depression or anxiety that doesn't respond to therapy, traditional therapy, and medication. I said, what do you do? She said, well, there are new therapies that have been developed that actually are honed in to help people with PTSD. She said, you might want to look at this some. I said, okay, and I did, and that will be the subject of our next video. This has been Douglas Bloch. I hope you found the information on this Flashback Friday video helpful. If so, please give it a like, as likes draw more and more people to this channel and hopefully some more subscribers. You can also leave your comments in the comments section or email me, douglasbloch@gmail.com. If you do want to subscribe to this channel, click on my photo in the closing credits. You'll be taken to my subscribe page. And if you click on the bell to the right, you'll be notified every time I do a new video or live chat. And if you want to contribute to this channel and become a patron, simply click on the Patreon image. You'll be taken to my crowdfunding site. And until next video, I wish you the best in your mental health recovery. Thank you so much.